The warm glow of Dubai International Airport's premium terminal wrapped itself around Keanu Reeves and his wife like a silent welcome. The evening air inside, the terminal shimmered with golden, reflections bouncing off, polished marble floors, tall glass walls, and the sleek architecture that made the airport feel more like a futuristic palace than a travel hub. Even in such a grand setting, Keanu carried his usual quiet presence, simple black shirt, charcoal jacket, and a calm expression that never demanded attention yet always drew eyes. His wife walked beside him gracefully, her soft beige travel dress moving like flowing silk with each step. Together they moved through the VIP corridor where only a few passengers walked, each one pausing for a moment to confirm whether the man before them was truly the Keanu Reeves. Some smiled subtly, others whispered with excitement, but Keanu nodded politely, avoiding any spotlight. Fame had never been his priority. Peace had. As they approached Gate A-17, the sign, Dubai Airlines, first-class boarding, illuminated in elegant gold lettering. A polished red carpet extended toward the jet bridge, welcoming only the most elite passengers. Keanu offered his wife the boarding passes with a gentle smile, letting her hand them to the attendant. She gave a warm greeting, clearly noticing the famous couple but maintaining professional calm. This Keanu appreciated. Once they stepped into the aircraft, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Dubai Airlines, first class, cabin was a masterpiece of luxury. Private suite pods with sliding wooden doors, crystal-like overhead lights designed to mimic starlight, and soft music humming in the background like a heartbeat of serenity. Every detail was crafted to feel royal. Keanu's wife inhaled softly, mesmerized. "This feels unreal," she whispered. Keanu smiled. "Anything for you?" They placed their small carry-ons inside the suite and sat down. The leather seats hugged them like clouds, and soft gold curtains wrapped their space. A few passengers discreetly glanced in their direction, but none intruded. It was, so far, the perfect beginning of their flight. Then, like a cold breeze sneaking into a warm room, the atmosphere shifted. A young air hostess approached from the aisle. Her walk was sharp, her expression stiff, and instead of offering a welcoming smile, she scanned Keanu and his wife with clear annoyance, as if already bothered by their presence. She greeted other passengers politely, but when her eyes returned to them, her energy changed. A subtle eye roll, a sigh too loud to be accidental, and a tight-lipped expression that suggested irritation rather than hospitality. Keanu noticed instantly. His wife did too. Still, he offered a gentle nod and said, "Good evening." The hostess didn't respond. She turned her head away and walked back without a word, leaving a strange tension in the air. Keanu's wife looked at him with confusion and quiet discomfort. The soft hum of the aircraft's systems filled the first-class cabin, blending with the calming music designed to relax passengers before takeoff. But for Keanu and his wife, the serenity was slowly cracking. The strange behavior of the air hostess lingered in the air like an unwelcome shadow. Minutes passed, and passengers continued to board. A few greeted Keanu politely, and he returned each gesture with his signature humility. His wife smiled warmly at an elderly couple who recognized them but didn't dare disturb their privacy. Everything around them felt gentle except for the one person meant to represent the airline's highest level of hospitality. Soon the same air hostess returned, this time carrying a tray of welcome drinks. Her posture was stiff, her lips pressed tightly together. She offered sparkling juice to the first passenger in the row, then to the next. She approached Keanu and his wife last, but not with courtesy. Instead, she paused, looked them up and down, and then deliberately skipped them. She walked past without a single word. Keanu's wife blinked, unsure if she had imagined it. "Did she just—" Keanu nodded softly. "Yes, she skipped us." His wife lowered her eyes, a sting of embarrassment warming her cheeks. This wasn't about service anymore. It felt personal, like the hostess had singled them out for reasons unknown. Keanu leaned toward her. "It's okay," he whispered, keeping his voice calm. "Let's not assume anything yet." But the situation only grew stranger. A few minutes later, Keanu gently pressed the service button. It chimed quietly, illuminating a small gold light above their suite. The air hostess was standing just a few steps away, speaking casually with another crew member. She noticed the light, but instead of acknowledging it, she turned her head the other way, pretending not to see it. The other crew member looked confused. "Aren't you going to answer that?" he asked softly. The hostess shrugged with an irritated sigh. "They can wait." Her tone wasn't just dismissive, it was disrespectful. Keanu's wife shifted uncomfortably in her seat, feeling the weight of humiliation pressing on her chest. She whispered, "Why is she acting like this?" "We didn't even ask for anything." Keanu gently placed his hand over hers. "Don't worry," he said, still keeping his calm. "We'll handle it. But we won't let anyone disrespect us." At that moment, the hostess finally approached, but with an expression sharp enough to slice through glass. Instead of greeting them, she glared and said, "What do you want now?" Keanu's polite request was simple. "Just water for my wife." The hostess exhaled loudly. "I'm busy. You'll have to wait like everyone else." Her voice echoed through the quiet cabin. Several passengers turned their heads, and just like that, the cold welcome became something far more serious. The cabin lights dimmed into a soft amber glow as flight attendants prepared for takeoff. But for Keanu and his wife, the atmosphere felt anything but warm. Every interaction with the air hostess was colder than the last, slicing into the comfort they were promised in Dubai Airlines elite first class. Keanu watched as the hostess walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the aisle floor, her attitude dripping with irritation. His wife adjusted in her seat, trying not to show how hurt she felt, but her eyes told the truth. Her hands tightened in her lap, fingers interlaced, fighting back the sting of humiliation. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman observed the scene with a confused frown. She whispered to her husband, "Did you see the way she spoke to them?" Her husband nodded quietly. "That was unnecessary." Keanu took a breath, slow, controlled. The kind of breath a man takes when he's trying to stay composed. He wasn't angry for himself. Fame had taught him patience. People had judged him, misread him, and even disrespected him before. But when it came to his wife, the rules were different. He didn't allow anyone to hurt her dignity. The hostess returned again, this time to distribute menus. She handed one politely to every passenger in the cabin. Except them. She didn't even stop at their row. She simply bypassed them entirely, pretending they didn't exist. It was no longer subtle. It was deliberate. Keanu's wife finally spoke in a soft, trembling voice. "Why is she doing this? We didn't even talk to her before boarding." Keanu brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Some people judge without knowing anything," he said gently. "But you don't deserve this." Before he could continue, the hostess suddenly turned back toward them, irritation burning in her eyes. She slammed a stack of extra menus onto a side counter and snapped, "If you wanted something, you should have told me earlier. I don't have time for drama." Drama, a word that cut deep. Keanu's expression finally changed. Not anger, but disbelief. His wife's eyes widened in shock. A few passengers gasped softly, unable to believe what they were hearing in first class of all places. One man sitting nearby spoke up. "Excuse me, that was unnecessary," he said firmly. The hostess rolled her eyes again, a motion she seemed to have mastered. "Sir, please stay out of it," she snapped. Then she looked at Keanu and his wife with an expression filled with invisible accusations. Keanu leaned back slowly, trying to maintain peace. "We didn't ask for anything except water," he said calmly. "And we asked politely." The hostess let out a frustrated huff. "I already said I'm busy." "You're not the only important people here." The words carried venom. The energy in the cabin shifted sharply. Passengers exchanged glances. Someone muttered, "This is unbelievable." The disrespect had gone beyond rudeness. It had turned into a public humiliation, and people were beginning to take notice. The disrespect hung in the air long after the hostess walked away, like a stain on the perfect luxury of the first-class cabin. Keanu's wife stared quietly at the soft leather of her seat. Her heart beat loud in her ears despite the low hum of the airplane. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want attention. But what she felt now was something harsher than anger. It was humiliation. Her eyes glistened, not with tears yet, but with the sharp shimmer of hurt pride. She lifted her hand and pressed her palm lightly against her chest, as if trying to calm the sting inside. Keanu noticed instantly. He leaned in closer, the warmth of his presence wrapping around her like a protective shield. "Hey," he whispered softly. Look at me. She lifted her eyes, but her expression was fragile, as though a single wrong word could break her. I don't understand, she murmured. We didn't do anything. Why is she treating us like this? In front of everyone? Her voice cracked slightly at the end. Keanu's heart tightened. He had seen cruelty in the world. He had lived long enough to understand. It comes in many forms, but seeing it directed at the person he loved most was different. It sharpened something in him, something that rarely surfaced. A quiet but powerful anger. You did nothing wrong, he said, his tone deep and reassuring. Some people see what they want to see. Some judge without reason. His wife looked toward the aisle where the hostess had disappeared, her eyes lowered in shame. People are looking, she whispered, her voice almost a breath. Keanu gently placed his hand over hers. Let them look, he said calmly. You have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing. But across the cabin, the atmosphere had changed. Passengers had begun whispering among themselves, exchanging glances of sympathy and disbelief. It wasn't just a private insult anymore. It was public and painful. The woman across the aisle gave Keanu's wife a small, supportive smile, trying silently to show she wasn't alone. But the worst part came moments later. The hostess reappeared with a forced grin, one that fooled no one. She stopped near their suite, holding a tray of water glasses. She looked at every passenger nearby but avoided making eye contact with Keanu and his wife. Then, without saying a word, she leaned forward and placed a water glass on their table with a loud, careless clink, hard enough to startle them. Water splashed over the rim. The hostess didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge it. She simply muttered under her breath, there. Happy now? The humiliation crashed down like a wave. Keanu's wife's eyes widened her, breath catching in her throat, a splash of water on her hand was nothing compared to the sting of those words. She pulled her hand back slowly, her cheeks warming with embarrassment as she wiped away the drops. Keanu's jaw tightened, not visibly enough to be dramatic, but enough for anyone watching closely to know that something inside him had shifted. The hum of the aircraft blended with whispers and soft gasps from surrounding passengers, each one feeling the electric tension that had erupted in first class. What had started as subtle rudeness had escalated into blatant disrespect, and now it was impossible to ignore. Eyes turned toward Keanu Reeves and his wife, some filled with curiosity, others with sympathy. But it wasn't just observation anymore. Someone was taking action. A middle-aged businessman sitting 2 rows behind them had been watching silently, adjusting the cuff of his crisp white shirt. He had seen countless things in his life, boardroom arguments, corporate betrayals, but what unfolded in front of him felt shocking. Not because it involved a celebrity, but because the behavior was completely unprovoked, cruel, and public. Slowly, he lifted his phone, hiding it just enough under his jacket, and started recording. Every gesture of the hostess, the sharp sighs, the eye rolls, the deliberate neglect, was captured. Every small, trembling expression on Keanu's wife's face, every careful, calm reaction from Keanu was documented. The screen showed reality, the raw contrast between respect and disrespect, civility and arrogance. Passengers began to notice. A young woman whispered to her friend, "Is he recording this?" The friend nodded, eyes wide. "Someone should," she said. "This is insane." The businessman's hand didn't tremble. His decision was deliberate. He understood the power of evidence, and he knew the world deserved to see this. In a moment when authority had failed, a witness would ensure accountability. Keanu, still composed, glanced subtly in the direction of the recording. His eyes met the man's for a fraction of a second. No words were exchanged. The unspoken understanding was clear. Someone had seen the truth. That alone brought a small sense of relief. Meanwhile, the hostess moved back and forth, unaware that every sarcastic glare and careless movement was being documented. Her arrogance was now immortalized on the tiny screen of a smartphone. The cabin atmosphere shifted further. Whispers grew louder. A few passengers subtly turned their devices toward the action, some pretending to check messages while secretly observing the unfolding drama. The air was charged, as though electricity flowed from the tension between injustice and witnessing. Keanu's wife noticing. The hushed attention around them whispered to him, "People are watching." Her voice was tinged with vulnerability. A mix of embarrassment and hope. Keanu nodded slightly, squeezing her hand gently. Let them see, he murmured, truth always finds its way at that moment. The tiny camera lens captured something more than disrespect. It captured a moment of resilience, quiet dignity, and courage in the face of cruelty, and unbeknownst to everyone, this recording would soon become more than a piece of evidence. It would be the spark that set the entire story ablaze across social media news, outlets, and global conversations. The soft hum of the airplane's engines continued. Yet the cabin was anything but peaceful. The tension, thick enough to feel, clung to every passenger in first class. Whispers had grown into murmurs, and concerned eyes darted toward the unfolding confrontation. The unprovoked disrespect of the air hostess had crossed a line, and now it was clear that intervention was necessary. Minutes later, the door to the cabin opened slightly, and a senior flight supervisor, a tall man in a crisp uniform, his expression calm but commanding, approached. He exuded authority, his presence alone demanding attention without a word. The hostess, noticing him, stiffened instantly, her confident demeanor faltering as she realized her behavior was about to be addressed. The supervisor walked directly to Keanu and his wife, bowing slightly in polite acknowledgement. "Good evening, sir, ma'am," he said with professionalism and warmth. "I understand there has been some discomfort. Please allow me to assist." Keanu, ever composed, nodded. "Thank you. It's been unusual," he said, his tone calm yet precise, a subtle signal that the situation was serious. The supervisor turned to the hostess, his gaze sharp but measured. "Can I have a word with you in private?" he asked. The hostess hesitated, her pride battling her fear, but eventually followed him toward the rear of the cabin. Passengers watched, tension rising like a crescendo in a silent symphony. A few whispered among themselves, "Finally!" And, "It's about time someone stepped in." From his position near his wife, Keanu observed everything with keen eyes. He knew this was the moment where authority would either restore order or allow the disrespect to continue. His wife leaned slightly against him, her fingers intertwined with his, drawing strength from his quiet presence. In the back, the supervisor spoke firmly, his voice low but deliberate, ensuring only the hostess could hear. The confrontation was private, but the intensity radiated outward. He reminded her of the airline's policies, the expectations of first-class service, and the consequences of deliberate rudeness. The hostess muttered defensive remarks, claiming Keanu and his wife had made unnecessary demands, but the supervisor's calm and unyielding tone left no room for argument. By the time he returned to Keanu's side, the supervisor's expression had softened slightly, acknowledging the couple. "Thank you for your patience," he said quietly. "We are addressing the matter." A ripple of relief passed through the nearby passengers, though the air was still charged with the remnants of humiliation. Keanu's wife let out a soft breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Finally," she whispered. Keanu placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Patience," he said softly. "Things are moving in the right direction." But even with authority intervening, the atmosphere remained tense. The hostess had not yet fully acknowledged her misconduct. The cabin had fallen into a quiet tension that was almost palpable. Passengers leaned slightly forward in their seats, sensing that a turning point was near. Keanu Reeves had remained calm, composed and patient up to this moment. But now something shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, the tightening of his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. But it radiated authority and presence. The hostess, now somewhat restrained by the supervisor's intervention, hovered near their suite, still muttering under her breath. The arrogance lingered, though the edge had dulled slightly. Keanu's wife sat quietly, her hands clasped together in her lap, trying to regain composure. She had drawn strength from his steady presence, but her eyes betrayed lingering hurt. Finally, Keanu spoke. His voice was calm, deep, and resonant, calm enough to maintain control, powerful enough to command attention. "I'm going to say something, and I need everyone to hear it clearly," he began. His words carried the weight of someone who never wasted energy on unnecessary conflict, but whose patience had limits. The hostess straightened, caught off guard. Passengers leaned closer, straining to listen. "My wife and I have done nothing to warrant this treatment," he continued. We boarded this flight expecting the same courtesy and professionalism that every passenger deserves. We asked politely for simple assistance, and yet we have been treated with disrespect, ignored, and humiliated. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Heads nodded in silent agreement. The intensity of his presence, the quiet dignity with which he spoke, left no room for dispute. He didn't shout, he didn't curse, but every word carried undeniable authority. Keanu's gaze softened as he turned to his wife. "You are not alone," he said, "and you should never feel that you are." The hostess, realizing the gravity of the moment, faltered. Her eyes widened and her usual smug expression dissolved into uncertainty. She could feel the weight of the cabin's gaze on her, of passengers witnessing every detail. Keanu straightened, looking around at the observers. Respect is not something earned from fame, money, or position. Respect is a human right, and anyone who denies it to another deserves. Accountability. The quiet was broken only by the soft hum of the engines and the faint whisper of passengers agreeing with him. One by one they exchanged glances, silently validating the truth of his words. He finally leaned back calm once more, having spoken not only for himself but for his wife and, indirectly, for every passenger watching. The message was clear. Injustice, however small or large, would not go unchallenged. Not with arrogance, not with fear, and certainly not with silence. The cabin held its breath, realizing that a celebrity's response could have been loud, angry, or performative, but instead, it was measured, dignified, and powerful. The quiet authority in Keanu Reeves's demeanor made the air hostesses, the cabin, once serene and filled with the muted luxury of Dubai Airlines first class, had transformed into a charged theater of confrontation. Keanu Reeves's measured response had shifted the balance, and passengers were now fully awake to the injustice that had unfolded before them. Whispers escalated into murmurs, murmurs into low voices, and soon the atmosphere was thick with tension and outrage. The air hostess, caught between her defiance and the supervisor's authority, fidgeted nervously. Her previous confidence had evaporated. Every glare, every sigh, every dismissive gesture was now scrutinized by dozens of witnesses. Even a simple movement drew the watchful eyes of passengers, some recording discreetly on their phones. A few passengers could no longer remain silent. One man from the middle row leaned forward and spoke firmly. "This is unacceptable. Everyone deserves basic respect." Another woman chimed in softly. "We've all seen how she's treating them. It's unprofessional." The hostess snapped back, attempting to regain control. "Please mind your own business," she barked. But the room was no longer hers to command. Murmurs of disagreement grew louder. Some passengers openly shook their heads. Others whispered apologies to Keanu and his wife for the behavior they had witnessed. Keanu remained calm, though the intensity in his eyes was unmistakable. He understood that this was no longer a private matter. It had become a reflection of respect, professionalism, and accountability. His wife, sitting beside him, felt a mix of relief and lingering embarrassment, her hand clasping his tightly. She realized that the entire cabin had become a witness to the courage it took to respond with dignity rather than retaliation. The supervisor moved between the air hostess and passengers, trying to de-escalate, but the hostess's defensive tone only fueled the rising energy. "This is overblown," she muttered, clearly frustrated by the attention and the growing dissent among passengers. At that moment, one of the passengers in the back row discreetly shared the live recording to the airplane's Wi-Fi network. Within minutes, other passengers were watching the confrontation unfold on their devices, the situation escalating into a shared experience. Some gasped, others murmured in outrage, and the cabin felt increasingly like a courtroom, with Keanu Reeves and his wife as the wronged plaintiff's passengers began to stand, pointing subtly, speaking up in defense. "You can't treat anyone like that," one man said firmly. "This is supposed to be first class." Another shouted, "Apologize now." The hostess's composure shattered. Her frustration boiled over, and she raised her voice, attempting to regain authority, but it was too late. The collective awareness of the cabin had shifted. The power she had wielded in dismissiveness had evaporated under the undeniable force of truth and public attention. Keanu leaned back, calm but resolute. He didn't need to raise his voice. The cabin remained charged with tension, a collective energy hanging in the air like a storm about to break. The once confident air hostess now stood frozen near the aisle, realizing her control had evaporated. Every eye in the first-class cabin seemed to weigh on her, and even the flight supervisor's calm authority carried the unspoken message. Her behavior had consequences. The supervisor approached her slowly, his posture firm yet professional. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low but clear, "you have been documented behaving in a way that is completely unacceptable. For Dubai Airlines staff, you will be removed from duty immediately and taken to the crew rest area." The hostess's eyes widened. Her pride, arrogance, and defiance collided with the realization that she had no escape. For a moment she opened her mouth, perhaps to protest, but no words came out. The recording on the passengers' phones, the whispers, the judgmental stares, all of it had become undeniable evidence. Keanu Reeves watched quietly, his composure intact, though the weight of the previous humiliation still lingered in his wife's posture. Passengers nearby exchanged subtle smiles of relief, acknowledging that justice, at least in this moment, was being served. As the hostess was escorted down the aisle, some passengers murmured quietly among themselves, commenting on the situation. One man muttered, "Finally, some accountability." Another woman whispered, "I can't believe this is happening mid-flight." The hostess, now fully aware of the gravity of her actions, looked back at Keanu and his wife. Her expression was a mix of shock, guilt, and embarrassment. There was no smugness left, only the stark reality of her behavior reflected in the eyes of everyone around her. Keanu's wife exhaled slowly, a small smile appearing as relief replaced humiliation. The quiet dignity she had maintained throughout was finally met with the respect she deserved. The supervisor returned to the couple, bowing slightly. "We deeply apologize for the actions of our staff. This behavior is not reflective of Dubai Airlines' standards. Thank you for your patience." Keanu nodded, his signature calmness restored. "Thank you. We appreciate your intervention," he replied, his voice measured but firm, signaling the importance of accountability without malice. Passengers continued to whisper and glance at their phones, sharing the moment with each other, understanding that what had happened was not just about a celebrity, it was about human dignity and respect. Principles that transcend status. The first-class cabin, once tense and chaotic, began to return to a semblance of calm. Yet the echoes of the confrontation lingered. The recording on passengers, devices ensuring that the story would not be forgotten. Keanu's wife finally allowed herself a full, relaxed breath, leaning slightly into his side. The storm had passed, but the message had been made clear. Arrogance and disrespect, no matter where it occurs. The airplane touched down smoothly at Dubai International Airport, the engines humming a soft, reassuring rhythm as passengers prepared to disembark. Yet for Keanu Reeves and his wife, the journey had been far more than a flight. It had been a test of patience, dignity, and the power of composure in the face of blatant disrespect. As the couple stepped off the aircraft, they were met by a small crowd of reporters and photographers who had already been alerted by social media posts circulating the recording, captured during the flight. The video, taken by an anonymous passenger, had gone viral within minutes, spreading across multiple platforms and drawing global attention. Headlines were forming even before they reached the terminal. Keanu Reeves confronts rude Dubai. Airlines hostess stands up for wife, and celebrity and kindness, a lesson in respect. Keanu faced the cameras, his expression calm yet purposeful. His wife stood beside him, radiating quiet strength and relief. Unlike many celebrity confrontations, there was no shouting, no dramatic displays of anger. What he projected instead was measured, dignified authority, the kind of presence that commands respect without needing to raise a voice. He began speaking, and every word carried weight. "We boarded that flight expecting the same respect and professionalism that every human being deserves," he said. "No one should ever be treated with rudeness or humiliation, whether you are famous or not. Respect is universal, and it is earned through kindness and integrity, not status or wealth." Reporters jotted down every word, capturing not just the statement, but the aura of calm moral authority that surrounded him. His message was clear. Power or fame does not excuse disrespect, and civility is a choice that should guide every interaction. His wife added softly, "We were shocked by the behavior, but the support we received from other passengers reminded us that people are capable of standing together for what is right. Even small acts of witnessing and courage make a difference." By the time they exited the airport, the story had already started trending worldwide. Social media users praised Keanu for his restraint and his principled stand, with thousands sharing clips of his calm, dignified response. Airline executives had begun internal investigations, and the air hostess faced formal reprimand and mandatory sensitivity training. What began as a simple flight had transformed into a global conversation about respect, empathy, and accountability. Keanu and his wife had not only protected their dignity, they had amplified a lesson for millions. Kindness, composure, and courage in the face of injustice are far more powerful than anger or retaliation. As they walked toward their awaiting car, hand in hand, Keanu glanced at his wife and smiled gently. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "you don't just travel the world. You teach it a lesson the world had watched, and the lesson had been learned."